So, thank you for giving this interview. We would just like to know a few questions. Firstly, we'd like to know why you joined the Rihla as a teacher here, instructor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, it's always an honour to serve the students of sacred knowledge, as well as filling in some, nowadays for us living in the West, quite substantial gaps in our even essential knowledge of how to pray, what to believe, how to fast, and so forth. There is the added pleasure of occasionally seeing a bud growing and a rose emerging, a potential new scholar. Quite a few of the new exciting generation of English-speaking scholars in the West have actually found their interest catalysed and triggered by coming on Rihla programs such as this. So as well as it being useful in the short term, there's also a kind of long-term cultural investment that's going on here, triggering some of our brightest and most committed and sincere young people to try and often effect a career change and to move into the study of sacred knowledge so that they can benefit the community full-time.
Fantastic. What is the significance of the Rihla for the English-speaking students that are coming here, mostly from non-Muslim countries?
Well, we now have this historically unprecedented situation in that the heartlands of the West, which were till quite recently closed to Muslims, are now home to increasingly assertive and exciting and innovative communities of people with a remarkably dynamic outlook amongst the young. But unfortunately they don't have access to the classical scholarship. There's a sense in which the ulama have been passing on the torch of wisdom generation after generation, but in many cases we haven't had the infrastructure to get it to reach London or New York or Chicago or Melbourne or wherever it might be, and that younger people are kind of reaching back in the past to try to find the heritage, but somehow the two don't quite connect. And that can have quite negative effects. Quite often young people can fall prey to a sense of alienation, that they're kind of cultural orphans. They find these books but they don't really know what the key is to these books. And so bringing those young people, often from quite remote places, to a centre like this, 200 or so young people together, and exposing them quite intensively for a whole month to the most authentic, mainstream, orthodox, uncompromising expression of Sunni Islam. It's like a bolt from the blue for many of these young people. You see their whole outlook, their worldview being reconfigured, because they'd never been told that Islam has this great scholarly tradition. All they'd done was to Google up fatwas and look things up in Bukhari. They had no idea that Islam has a consensual scholarly tradition that they need to be attached to, and for many of them that's kind of an incredible relief, because it means they don't have to make their own fatwas or take their own decisions on Aqidah. There is a consensus of scholars which they can now access, which can help them with all of those questions.
Fantastic. And how have you seen the program develop over the years?
The program depends to some extent on the dynamics of the group, the kind of students. Often groups tend to follow strong personalities. The teachers as well are not always the same teachers every year, so it has a different flavour, and of course it's also affected by the environment. Last year we were up the mountain in Bursa, which was quite a remote location. You had to drive for an hour really to get to the nearest set of serious shops. Here we're in the middle of Europe's biggest city. It couldn't be more different, with the adhan on all sides and the extraordinary, wonderful spectacle of the sort of Islamic revival that's going on in Turkey now. So that again has given a different flavour to the proceedings. It's more upbeat, a bit more urban, a bit more energised. But the basic spread of subjects, I think, has, in its core curriculum, as it were, generally made sure that the students do have a basic exposure to the basic Aqidah, because a lot of our young people are really shaky on some important things that they need to believe, and also the fiqh that they need to get up to speed to make sure that they're not spending the rest of their lives getting the prayer wrong, for instance, which is a catastrophe, which sometimes happens. And you can, while they're still young, you can catch that now and help them to get it right. So it's an extraordinary investment in these young people. But each year the fragrance of the gathering, as it would have been said once upon a time, is somewhat different, but each time it's great.
What motivated you to write the book of Contentions down?
Well, we do have a tradition of reverence for the word in our civilization. There is a sense in which there is potential triggering of intuitions that can take place when interesting concepts are unexpectedly juxtaposed. And without sounding too grandiose, I wanted to see whether the English language could be, now that we've inhabited it for some decades now, an adequate vehicle for exploring some of those catalytic moments that can happen when religious conceptions collide, interact, marry each other, to see what sort of inner perceptions can be triggered by that process. And more prosaically, I suppose it comes from the fact that regularly I have ideas which I probably can't take much further, but rather than just lose them, I try and catch them, as it were, with my butterfly net as they go sailing by, and I write them down on the back of an envelope or wherever I happen to be, and when I've got enough of them I just publish them. Some of them are quite easy and obvious, some of them are a bit enigmatic, some of them even I don't understand very well. But I thought it would be good just to help people to navigate through them, because they kind of reflect my own personal journey in a certain way, and they do need a context, just to flesh out the bones by providing a commentary. So I have published this book, Commentary on the 11th Contentions, which takes 100 of them and explains at least what I think that they mean.
Are you planning to write further books in the series?
I shall see what the reception is. It may be that people are just more puzzled and perplexed by them. I've seen various brave attempts to comment on the contentions on the internet, and they're often very interesting and profound, but they're not really picking up what I actually mean to say. That's part of the exercise, is just to get people thinking about particular, often difficult, paradoxical, awkward subjects. So I don't mind that that discourse is going on, but I want to see whether people are actually learning. Otherwise it's just an exercise in getting another book out, which is not the point. I want to see if it actually helps people, if people think that some of their 1001 questions about Islam and the modern world and truth and virtue and all of those big things are actually helped by these little sort of snappy sound bites that I'm offering. If not, then there's no point.
And how do you see the future of Islamic writing in the English language developing? We have a lot of translations have come out, and now this is sort of reaching new ground.
Translations are useful, but you have to remember that other Muslim peoples in the past didn't translate everything. A lot of books were just left in Arabic. Hadith, for instance, didn't go into Persian and Turkish and those other languages because the hadith were to be studied by the ulama in the original Arabic. As soon as you translate something, you are imposing your own interpretation on it, which is dangerous. So my view is that we should move beyond the stage of just trying to translate the whole Islamic library, which is hundreds of thousands of books, and instead leave those books for the ulama to be expounded to the masses in new books, so that the hadith are taken in context with reference to the commentaries and not abused. So I think that we've now moved beyond the generation of translations, and we're moving into a space which we're still not populating very well, which is to create our own works that respond to our own situation, that quarry the tradition for the best of the wisdom of the past, that use the Quran and the Hadith in a responsible and authentic and classical way, rather than the arbitrary way that you quite often see nowadays, in order to demonstrate the absolute living relevance and vitality of Islam to the new generation in this very difficult civilizational point in human history in which we find ourselves.
And we just wanted you to give us a small commentary of one particular contention, which was if you put the Sunnah before mercy, then you lose both. Just so we can get a snapshot of what this book is like. And
if you put the Sunnah before mercy, you've lost both. I suppose it means that the Holy Prophet ﷺ is sent rahmatan lil alameen, as a mercy to the worlds. If, as a non-expert, non-trained, non-authenticated interpreter of the Hadith, you come up with an interpretation of Islam that is a mirror to your own anger, insecurity, desire to get back on a world that has oppressed you, then you will produce something that cannot reflect the Prophet's own role for his mission, which is to be a mercy to the world, and instead you will, as it were, reinvent the world's image of the Holy Prophet ﷺ as simply as a mirror to your own volcanic anger and desire to hit back at a world that's misunderstood you. And there's a lot of that in the Islamic world at the moment, a lot of abuse of the Sunnah in order to allow people to use it really as a megaphone for their own frustrations. And that's repelling a lot of people from Islam, from Tawheed. Often the people that claim most vigorously to be following and imposing the Sunnah are the people who are best at making people run away from Islam.
Great, well thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.